of the Judiciary Committee.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of S. 1789, but as someone who helped write the Drug Control Act of 1986 that we seek to amend, I'd like to make a few observations to set the record straight. It is indeed true that the death of basketball star Len Bias served as an exclamation point concerning the threat posed to our nation by the scourge of illegal drug use. The fact that someone who seemed bigger than life could fall prey to the growing cocaine epidemic brought home the reality of the danger to every home with a television set that had tuned into the University of Maryland basketball games. And that reality was not lost. The number of Americans addicted to cocaine dramatically increased in the 1980s, thanks in major part to the escalation in crack use. Hospital emergencies increased by 110% in 1986. From 1984 to 1987, cocaine incidents increased fourfold. The crack epidemic was associated with a dramatic increase in drug gang-related violence. A 1988 study by the Bureau of Justice Statistics found that in New York City, crack use was tied to 32% of all homicides and 60% of all drug-related homicides. I would add that even 5 years after the drug bill was considered on this floor, there was a growing concern over the crack epidemic which plagued minority neighborhoods. The acclaimed depiction of this scourge was even portrayed in the movie New Jack City. Director Mario Van Peebles, also one of the main characters in the film, observed at that time that the immediate problem is that crack is and was a killer in the black community today. That's what we faced at the time we passed this bill. This is the context of the crack epidemic and the 1986 drug bill. The concern about crack cocaine was, and in my view, remains a valid one. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, crack causes faster and shorter highs than powder, which results in more frequent use. Crack cocaine is also associated with gang activities and violence as evidenced by the U.S. Sentencing Commission data. There is, in my view, a basis for disparate treatment of those who traffic in crack versus powder. Having said that, the conclusion that there's a basis for treating crack and powder differently is in no way a justification for the 100-to-1 sentencing ratio contained in the 1986 drug bill. We initially came out of committee with a 20-to-1 ratio. By the time we finished on the floor, it was 100-to-1. We didn't really have an evidentiary basis for that, but that's what we did, thinking we were doing the right thing at the time. Certainly one of the sad ironies in this entire episode is that a bill which was characterized by some as a response to the crack epidemic in African-American communities has led to racial sentencing disparities, which simply cannot be ignored in any reasoned discussion of this issue. When African-Americans, low-level crack defendants represent 10 times the number of low-level white crack defendants, I don't think we can simply close our eyes.
Gentleman's recognized for an additional minute.
Although I cannot and could not support the legislation reported out of our committee to completely eliminate any disparity in the treatment of these illicit substances, that is not what we have before us today on this floor. I must say that from a law enforcement standpoint, perhaps the most important factor here is the amount of the substance that's covered. According to narcotics officers I've spoken with, you want to reach the wholesale and mid-level traffickers who often traffic in 1-ounce quantities. That's why S. 1789 would raise the amount of crack cocaine necessary to trigger a mandatory 5-year sentence from 5 grams to 28 grams, which is close to the 1 ounce. This does seem to make some sense. It is fair and just treatment of the problem. It serves the interests of law enforcement in reaching wholesale and mid-level traffickers while reducing the crack powder ratio to 18-to-1 from the current 100-to-1. I think this is tough but fair. I would not support going further. I support this bill very strongly. I believe that this is what justice should be about. This is a well-crafted bill, a good compromise. It serves the ends of justice and fairness. I hope people will support it.
Gentleman yields back.